At this time, I will call the January 15th, 2020 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Joanne Chester. Here. Matt Cho. Here. Ashley McLaughlin.
Here.
Adam Rouge. Nancy Uteman.
Here.
Charles Warmbrun.
Here.
Harvey Welch.
Here, we have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay. At this time, then, we'll have approval of the minutes of previous meetings.
On the September 18th minutes, at the very end, it says that acting chair Warmbrun adjourned the meeting, but I didn't. It was Chair Welch was here, so he adjourned the meeting.
Yeah,
On the last page, 12.
it's true.
No,
Thank you.
I wasn't the acting chair that night.
No, I was here for
You were
that.
here for the whole thing.
Any other corrections to the minutes? At this time, then, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
I think she's asking for a motion.
I move to approve the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Can I believe just all in favor of the amended minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by the same? The minutes are approved. I'm sorry.
Really quickly, if I can just remind everybody to turn on their microphones and talk into their microphone. Thank you.
Now, since there was not a quorum at the last meeting, then we have no minutes, or how does that, of the December 18th? Oh, they're very, I see. All right. We do have minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, then at this time, entertain a motion regarding those minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of December 18, 2019.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by the same vote? Those minutes are approved. Are there any communications?
No.
All right, then at this time, I would ask anybody that may wish to give testimony here to please rise. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your belief?
I do.
Thank you. At this time, then, I will call for hearing ZBA 2019 C-05, a request for a conditional use permit by the Housing Authority of Champaign County to allow construction and operation of an assisted living facility at 1606 East Colorado Avenue in the B3 General Business Zoning District. And we have a staff report, please.
Good evening, Board. The first thing I'd like to do is make a slight correction to the staff report. The Housing Authority's representative, John Daly, is the Director of Capital Assets, not the Executive Director. That was my fault. Moving on July 18th of last year, the ZBA granted a conditional use permit to allow the Housing Authority of Champaign County to build an assisted living facility at 1606 Colorado Avenue. The permit expired 1 year later before the HACC was able to close on the project funding and begin construction, which requires them to request a new conditional use permit. This permit application is identical to the conditional use permit approved by the ZBA last year. Most of the relevant case materials referenced from the 2018 staff report, and I will refresh the highlights. Again, Section 61A of the zoning ordinance permits an assisted living facility in the B3 district with a conditional use permit. The ZBA must review the CUP application and may vote to approve with conditions, or deny the application. Exhibit A shows that the subject property is located on the north side of Colorado Avenue between Philo Road and Prairie Winds Drive and is zoned B3 general business. We have some slides showing the property looking from the south. The land is currently vacant. It's bounded on the west by the Urbana Secure Self-Storage and the CVS Pharmacy further west, which are both zoned B3, as is that entire strip district. It's bounded on the north by multifamily residential, which is the point, and to the east, which is R4, Stone Ridge Square Apartments. And on the south, it's zoned B3, and that's farmland. And to the southeast is Prairie Winds, and that's zoned R2, single-family residential. Future land use for the property and property to the south and west is community business, and to the east is designated for multifamily use, and to the southeast is mixed residential. The comprehensive plan does specify this area for studying as the potential for alternative land uses for redevelopment of the area. And staff contend that an assisted living facility would be a viable alternative land use that could successfully buffer the existing commercial and multifamily residential uses that currently face each other across a long vacant lot. The City of Urbana was awarded funding under IDA's Permanent Supportive Housing Development Program with a goal to increase housing options for households headed by persons with disabilities and households that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. The project category's definition of permanent supportive housing falls within the zoning ordinance's definition of an assisted living facility. Exhibit D is a site plan of the property. This is facing north on the right-hand side of the screen. The funding would be used to create up to 24 units of permanent supportive housing in 4 one-story buildings, each with 6 one-bed, one-bath dwelling units. And Building B, which is a little larger, also contains a community area. The dimensions of the property and the proposed structures meet the criteria of the zoning ordinance, as do the floor area and open space ratios. Moving into the requirements for a conditional use permit. I'll back up a bit. This is a little close-up of the site plans with it just split across so you can see the detail. They're proposing parking spaces for each building adjacent to the property. There'd be the required landscaping and parking lot shade trees. And the proposed development still meets the 3 conditional use permit criteria: that it is conducive to the public convenience at that location, that it is designed and operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the B3 district or injurious to the public welfare, and that it conforms to the regulations and preserves the essential character of the B3 general business district. The board may impose such additional conditions on the operation of the proposed use as are necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare. And the findings are summarized in the original 2018 staff report. And I would like to stress that the proposed use is consistent with the applicable regulations and preserves the essential character of the B3 district, as it will provide needed daily living assistance to seniors and others in an environment proximal to necessary goods and services, transportation, and open space. The Zoning Board of Appeals has the following options in this case: to grant the conditional use as submitted, deny the conditional use as submitted, or to grant the conditional use along with any additional conditions and requirements as are necessary. As in the original case, staff recommends that the Zoning Board of Appeals approve the proposed conditional use subject to the following condition: that the proposed development generally conforms with the site plan in attachment 2, Exhibit D, entitled Permanent Supportive Housing, 24 units at 1606 East Colorado Avenue, dated July 9th, 2018, that was submitted with the application. And I will take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff?
I do have one question. I see that at the north end, there is a retention pond,
Yes.
and there are a lot of children living in that Stone Ridge apartment area.
Mhm.
Will there be any fencing around this
There-
retention pond for the safety of children?
The retention pond would follow any necessary regulations that building code would require.
And do you know what that is?
No, I don't. I do believe that the site plan currently does not show fencing. I don't believe that detention ponds are required to have a fence around them. But I can't say for certain on that. Mr. Daly is here, and he might be able to answer that question.
Okay. I like the general plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? No. Thank you, Marcus. Is the petitioner or representative of the petitioner here? I don't, I was looking that way. Did you stand up and be sworn?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I had.
That's all right, I can do it again. Do you swear that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your belief?
I do.
Thank you. You have to sign in, sir.
To address your question, I am not sure we would supply what would be required in order to get our building permit. There's always, in projects I've done in the past, adjustments along the line. We'll do whatever is required. Currently, I don't believe that there is a fence there. We have other developments with detention without fences.
You know, I'm just concerned about all the children
No, I
in that
understand.
the neighboring buildings. Will your development have a fence along the property line?
I believe we need to have a fence, like a privacy fence, between us and adjoining properties. That's a typical requirement.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have a specific answer.
Well, and maybe the zoning department can find out if you require them at all, or,
A fence is not required around the entire property. We can find out if a fence is required around the detention pond, and as is, would be required without stating as a condition, it would have to follow all building codes and any other relevant regulations. So if there is a property maintenance code or a building code that requires a fence around a detention pond, that would automatically be required. Now, if there isn't a requirement for the city to normally have a fence around a detention pond, the Zoning Board of Appeals, if they feel that that is necessary, a necessary condition, they can place that additional requirement. But I want to assure you that if the city has a requirement, they would be required to follow it without you having to specify that.
Go on, Joanne.
I can think of an example up on, like, that road that goes east on where Farm and Fleet is. And there's the first subdivision there. On the west side has a detention-like area for runoff. And I think it's mainly just slushy. And there's some up on North Prospect where there's that new housing stuff that's up there. I don't believe they have fences, but they have, it's like a detention area. It's not steep.
Right.
It's gradual. And what seems to me what they get is more slush. So I don't think we would be talking about something that was deep. But there would just be runoff and it would dry up
Correct.
pretty quickly.
Excuse me, did I understand you to say, though, there was going to be a privacy fence around or not?
We have been required in the past, when we apply for the building permits, to include, we had another project in Urbana where it required a wood fence on one side of the property between our buildings and a residential area. With my experience, it kind of depends on where the project is and what's next to it.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional questions for the petitioner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the petition as well, besides the petitioner? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to this request? Hearing none, then I believe we are ready for motion in regards to this particular hearing. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that we approve ZBA dash 2019-C-05 for approval with the following condition: that the proposed development generally conforms with the site plan and attachment to Exhibit D entitled Permanent Supportive Housing dash 24 units at 1606 East Colorado Avenue, dated July 9th, 2018, submitted with this application. And could I also make a second condition that the staff report from the July 2018 meeting and the minutes from that meeting be included?
In the ordinance, or?
For the purposes of, I believe there was a lot of more discussion in July of 2018 about different aspects of this particular case that probably are in the back of our minds that we're not addressing tonight, that we addressed then. So I'm just wondering if we should put the minutes or the actual staff report in our motion.
I'm not sure how, I would be glad to if you can suggest a way of doing that.
Good idea.
Could we just forward those minutes to the city council along with any
This
motion that
doesn't go to
approves?
city council, it stops
This
right
just
here.
stops here? Oh,
Yeah.
never mind.
So last year, ZBA heard the case, approved it with the one condition after discussion. This was, I believe, before you were on the board. And so the hope was that board would have reviewed the previous staff report and the minutes from that report so that they would then have that knowledge to discuss it tonight and any other concerns that they still might have from last year.
Or was that in the staff report this time around?
It started off with saying,
Can I start by can I second your motion without that included, and then we can discuss those minutes, we can discuss what was happening then?
Sure.
We can still amend.
Excuse me, it's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion then? Is that what you wanted to be heard?
Yeah, basically.
Go ahead.
So, I would be interested in hearing a summary of what was discussed the last time this project was brought forward, if there's a way to give a quick summary. Yeah, as part of our discussion, since we're discussing whether we should proceed on this
I mean, I have
motion.
if anyone.
have the minutes, if anybody wants me to summarize them on the
Was
fly.
there a condition?
Yes.
on-
Go ahead, Ashley, you can summarize it.
I will get to that. Yeah. So, we asked about if they pay property taxes to City of Urbana. If the units would be intended for individuals or families, and the amount of handicap spaces required. Looking for the answers for those. Actually, don't see the, oh. They would be applying for tax exemption. They were considering adding additional handicap spaces. And there's not a manager on site 24 hours a day. That was another question about supervision. And it is a permanent assisted living facility rather than a transitional assisted living facility. Typically, residents in this type of facility stay for extended periods of time. And 24 units was the most they could fit on that site, like with comfortably. The units were approximately 700 square feet. And that was the extent of the discussion. It wasn't lengthy. There were just little questions, but not a lot of discussion around them. And then the conditions were the same as tonight, that it would generally conformed with the site plan and all applicable zoning and building safety codes.
Thank you. Is there additional discussion then?
So, does the site plan make available handicap parking?
Yes.
There will be handicap parking spaces as required by Urbana Building Code. We have to put in what is required in order to get a building permit.
I think the question was, it seemed like it was intended for residents with different abilities, and so the question was it sufficient? Like, would every unit need
Okay,
a handicap space?
not every unit would need a handicap space, because not all disabilities are physical, and I believe that was the discussion previously.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry, any additional questions for the petitioner?
And I gather, according to your plan, that there is at least one parking place per unit?
I'm not sure that there's one per unit, there's one, whatever your code requires.
Our
And this,
code-
we work in a lot of different jurisdictions, and I can't keep them all straight.
It appears from the site plan that there are 18 spaces for the southerly two buildings, and an additional, actually 20, 18 plus 2 accessible, and then another 18 plus 2 accessible on the north half. So there will actually be 40 spaces for 24 units.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? All right. I believe that we should have the motion made again in light of all the questions.
Well, I don't have my slide again for that number, but I think the motion I made, I would just keep
And
it.
here it is, this one.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily mean you need to read it again, but I think we need procedurally to do it again.
This one.
Yeah, but that doesn't give me that. All right.
Wait, you have a question before we do the
I
motion?
know, I said, for just parliamentary, can I say, I move the question, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I
It means
think
the
so.
same one he already said.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So you reiterate your same motion, correct?
Well, yes.
And I believe it's been seconded then.
Yes.
All right. I believe we're ready for a vote.
Julian Chester,
Yes.
Matt Choate. Yes. Ashley McLaughlin,
Yes.
Adam Ruth,
Yes.
Nancy Newman,
Yes.
Charles Warburg,
Yes.
Harvey Welch?
Yes. And motion carries. Thank you. Moving on then, and call for hearing case ZBA 2019-C-06, a request by St. Nicholas Orthodox Church represented by Father James Ellison for a conditional use permit to allow operation of a church, temple, or mosque at 1807 North Federal Drive in the IN-1 Light Industrial Office Zoning District. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening. Father James Ellison, as a representative of St. Nicholas Orthodox Church, is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a church in the existing building at 1807 Federal Drive. The church is a contingency purchaser. It's currently owned by the 1807 North Federal Drive LLC. The ZBA must review the CUP application and approve with conditions or deny the application. The property is located on the west side of Federal Drive between Cardinal Court and the proposed Union Gardens residential development to the south, shown on Exhibit A. The parcel is approximately 1.5 acres and contains a building over 10,000 square feet and an 11-car parking lot currently accessed from North Federal Drive. In 2018, the church was granted a series of variances to allow the expansion of their existing building at 312 West Elm Street. The expansion proved too expensive, and the church is now looking to relocate to a larger building to accommodate their growing congregation. The property is currently used by Sagamore Publishing. The building is located on the north half of the parcel, and the south half is undeveloped and will likely be used for the additional parking that will be required for the larger occupancy of the church. The building itself is divided into two spaces, a smaller one on the east with a showroom and office, and a 70-foot by 98-foot warehouse. We have some pictures courtesy of Google. This is looking at the property from the northeast. We have the existing building, the vacant land to the south for future parking, undeveloped land to the further south, and we have a canteen vending services. This shows as undeveloped, but it's actually Bimby Bakeries, and there is an electronics shop here to the northeast and another business to the north. The property and land to the, we have a couple more slides here. This is coming down Federal Drive, looking at the east side of the property, and on Cardinal Court, looking at the subject property on the left-hand side and Bimby Bakery on the right-hand side. And this is looking at the church on the right-hand side of the property and canteen services on the left. So it's, you know, it's a commercial industrial development with that sort of typical traffic that concentrates during the day. This properties, the subject church's services are usually in the evenings and on weekends, so that would be a good alternation of traffic peak times. As you can see from the zoning map, the subject property and land to the west, north, and east are all zoned light industrial. Land to the south is multifamily residential, and as well as property further west, and then property far to the east is zoned B3. Future land use designation, this property and properties along its latitude are designated for light industrial use. Land to the south is designated for institutional use, which is a reflection of a earlier special use permit that was granted to a different church to develop that farmland to the south into a large church complex. And then the land to the southeast is designated for multifamily land use. The dimensions of the property and the existing building meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The lot is 1.5 acres and the building is 10,000 square feet. Other public uses permitted in the IN1 zoning district include municipal or government buildings and educational and charitable institutions. The floor area and open space ratios meet the requirements. Because there would be no expansion proposed at this time, it would meet the FAR and open space requirements. And there should be sufficient ground to the south to put in the necessary additional parking. Moving into the requirements for a conditional use permit, the proposed church is conducive to the public convenience at this location due to its proximity to Lincoln Avenue and I-74, which will make it easy to get to for congregants. There is also a transit stop to the north in case people want to use that and walk down the existing sidewalk to the church. Church traffic will be highest on nights and weekends when neighboring businesses are not in operation, so regular business should not be disrupted. And the existing building is already accessible for people with mobility issues. Secondly, that the proposed church will be designed, located, and operated so as not to be reasonably injurious or detrimental to the IN1 zoning district or to the public welfare. By shifting the main building usage times from weekdays to nights and weekends should limit any disruption to nearby businesses, as previously stated, and it will also provide additional security by having people in the area at times when there are not currently people in the area. Changing from an industrial building to a church will also provide a valuable buffer for any future residential use to the south. And since St. Nicholas Church is purchasing property, that buffer should remain in place for the foreseeable future. A 5-foot landscaping buffer will be required along the south property line, as will shade trees for any parking lot expansion. This will also provide screening for the parking lot. Finally, the proposed church will conform to the applicable regulations and preserve the character of the IN1 zoning district. It will operate within the existing building, and any renovations will meet building safety standards. Landscape, lighting, and other required plans will be submitted as part of the building plan review process. In addition, the Zoning Board of Appeals may also impose such additional conditions as they deem necessary. The summary of findings are included in the staff report. I want to highlight again that the proposed church will operate in the existing building and require additional automobile and bicycle parking, and any proposed expansion or renovations will meet city code requirements. The ZBA's options are to grant the conditional use as submitted, deny the conditional use as submitted, or grant the conditional use with any additional conditions or requirements. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. The church must use the existing condition at 1807 North Federal Drive. I would like to give an option on the condition. The staff memo had said any expansions or renovations would need to meet city codes. This recommendation here says any future expansion of the building will require a conditional use permit. If you want to have more regulatory authority over the expansion of the building, you could require them to come back for a new conditional use permit, or you could simply stop the condition after the first sentence, if that makes sense. You can either say any future expansion just has to meet city codes, and the Zoning Board of Appeals trusts city staff to make sure that it meets all regulations, or if you want to see any future renovations or expansions, expansions, not renovations, because we're talking strictly about exterior expansion, then you could add in the second sentence. I hope I didn't make that too confusing. That, I will take any questions. Father James Ellison is here to answer any questions on behalf of the church.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff?
I do have one question. On the screen that we're reading here,
Yes.
it says the church must use the existing building. Is the word must or may? You have the church must
Yes,
use.
you're right. So if the church knocked the building down and put up a new building, that might change the flavor of the conditional use permit application. Their contention was that they were planning on using the building that's there. So that's how staff are reviewing the proposal. If they were going to knock it down and put up a new building, then we would have requested site plans and elevations and renderings for that. Since their contention is they're using this building, you notice that you don't have any site plans or elevations before you because they're saying we're using that building. So that's why we're saying must.
Must, okay. Thank you.
And also, to follow up on your question, by saying the church must use the existing building, does that mean if something happens and St. Nicholas decides not to use this building, any other organization would have to come forward for a new conditional use permit, and the conditional use permit would expire upon them not using it?
The conditional use permit, as you noticed from the previous case, will expire in a year. So if St. Nicholas or some other church doesn't use a CUP that you grant it, then it will automatically expire. But if, say, St. John's Church came and decided to use it as a church inside this building, I believe the conditional use permit would be valid for them
Because they usually
if
stay
they
with the
acted
building.
on it within the year.
Could we say St. Nicholas Church must use, St. Nicholas Orthodox Church must use the existing building? And then it would be if, for some reason, the likelihood of this happening is minuscule, but if for some reason there was a change, they would have to come back before us.
I'm not sure. I'll entertain.
Yeah, so usually always when conditional use permits go through, the really binding authority of the conditional use permit is, as well as the record and the vote here, there's going to be a recorded document, a decision sheet, and it's for the applicant and the applicant only, and it is tied partially to the land, but it's the applicant applying for this conditional use.
Okay, cool.
So in that case, it differs from a variance, which
Okay, got
runs
it.
with the
Thank you.
property. Thank you.
Are there additional questions for staff? Thank you, Marcus. Petitioner desire to be heard? Father James?
I'm glad to answer questions, but I don't have any additional information.
Let me, are there any questions for? Wait, hold on. Come forward, Father, there is a question. Do you have anything to say before I turn it
No,
over
I'm
for
glad
the
to take
question?
questions.
All right. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Father. Just out of curiosity, will this be an expansion of your ministry with another location? Because you already have a location.
No, we're hoping to sell our existing
So you're
location.
moving and selling, okay. Is that something that's already lined up, or is that something that you're just looking at in the
Well,
future?
this permit makes us able to buy the property before, we haven't put our property up for sale
Right.
until we secure this new one, so.
Okay,
But we will shortly.
sure.
You're in the market.
No, but I'm always interested.
Go ahead, Joanne.
I was looking forward to seeing your remodeled church,
We were too.
but I did realize at the time that I thought, oh, this is going to cost a lot of money.
Well, we had to go through the process to actually find out what it was going to
Yeah.
cost, and it was a little beyond our means,
Yeah.
so.
Are there additional questions for the petitioner? Go
Do you
ahead.
envision any future expansion of this site?
Probably not looking that far ahead. I think this will serve our needs for quite a while. We've been in our current building 15, 16 years, and I'm sure it will, I mean, it's going to triple the amount of space we have, so I think we'll be in good shape for quite a while. I would anticipate if we move beyond this, we'll be ready to build a magnificent new building. I think that'll be beyond my watch. So,
That's great.
Are there any additional questions for the petitioner? Thank you, Father. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the petition? All right. You'll have to be sworn as well. Sir, I'll have to swear you in that you come forward. And you want to speak in favor or against? I'm sorry.
What's your name?
I said, do you want to speak in favor of this petition or against it?
I don't want to speak either way.
Oh, I thought you did, then you can
can't hear what you're saying.
return to your seat. I thought you indicated you wanted to be heard.
I do want to be heard.
Well, then I'll have to swear you in. Do you swear that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your belief? You have to indicate yes or no.
I don't understand what you're saying.
You can have a seat. Sir, you'll have to sign in. Now, you can go ahead and say what you want to say.
Do what?
You can speak to whatever you want to say.
Okay. Yeah, the planning group, do you have any plans on this building, what they're going to do?
They are proposing to use the existing building that Sagamore Publishing is currently using. They'll be presumably doing some interior renovations so that they can change it from being a publishing house to being a church. But as I understand it, they won't be doing anything to the outside of the building, at least expanding its size. They will be required to add in some parking, though. But they will submit any building plans before they get a building permit.
Well, why would you okay it until you see the plans?
It's
Because there's some situations out there that, in my eyes, need to know what they're going to do. If they're going to make a bigger parking lot and that kind of thing, which they will.
So they'll need to submit plans to do that. All this hearing is to say if they can use the building that's already there as a church, as long as they follow all the other rules.
Okay. So it's just to say, hey, they
You
can
can-
use it for a church.
Right. Like if they wanted to use it as a supermarket, they'd have to get permission to do that.
But they have to use it as it is, sits right today.
Correct. Other than if it's approved and the parking lot expansion is okay, they can use it as a church.
So for them to expand in any way, they have to go through another hearing.
Not a hearing, but they need to bring their building permit plans into the city, and city staff look at them to make sure that they follow the zoning ordinance, so that they respect all the yards, they're not too close to the property lines, they put in any landscaping that's required, it's not any taller than it's allowed to be.
Well, how will the public know what's going on?
Well, so the public isn't advised of all building permits anyways, because people are supposed to follow the building code, and the building code is adopted by the city. So there are rules about building and
But I know
expanding
some
them.
properties right close to there that the public wasn't notified of situation. So I have a concern about that.
Okay. Well, if you'd like, we can take your phone number or email address and contact you and discuss the specific concerns about any expansions here at this property.
Okay.
If you want to hang out, if you want to stay after the meeting, I can get your phone number and name, and we can keep you updated on things.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for sharing your concerns.
Sir, do you have anything else you want to express?
Do what?
I said, do you have any other concerns you want to address?
Well, I can't address them until I see the plans.
All right. That's fine, then. Thank you. Anyone else want to be heard in regards to this petition? Hearing none. Is there any other additional input from staff in regards to what has been raised? No. All right, hearing none, then I believe we're ready for a motion.
Okay. I move that we approve the case ZBA 2019 C06 with the condition that the church must use the existing building at 1807 North Federal Drive. Any future expansion of the building must meet city code.
It's been moved. Do we have a second to that? Second. It's now been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to call this for a vote.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Ms. Utman?
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
And Ms. Chester?
That motion carries as well, and that petition has been approved. Thank you. At this time, we will now call for hearing ZBA-2019-Major-12, a request by Stroh Real Estate Holdings, LLC, for a major variance to allow a freestanding commercial sign at 1907 North Lincoln Avenue in the R5 medium-high multiple-family residential zoning district. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you. And this case does go to City Council. This is a major variance. So there'll be an ordinance and everything that will be prepared after this meeting. So the Stow Real Estate Holdings Group is requesting a major variance to construct a freestanding commercial sign for the new plasma collection facility at 907 North Lincoln Avenue. The freestanding commercial signs, most signs that a business would be able to use and apply for in the city of Urbana are not allowed in the R5 medium-high multiple-family residential zoning district per the zoning ordinance. Stow was recently granted a special use permit by City Council that was heard by Plan Commission. That was approved on December 2nd, 2019 to allow a plasma collection facility in the R5 zoning district. At that time, there was a lot of discussion about the site plan, and generally it was well received amongst Plan Commission members and City Council. If you turn to page 3 of the staff report, you can see a table here. It has R5 sign allowances in the R5 zoning district. As you can see, most signs that a business would be interested in constructing are not allowed. But residential type signs, subdivision signs, multifamily residential identification signs, institutional monument signs, and property sale and rental signs are allowed. Since some business and office uses are allowed in R5 with a special or conditional use permit, it appears to be an oversight of the zoning ordinance to not allow signs for those uses in this zoning district. The table below on page 3 does illustrate that. And it's important to note, too, that unless it's a sign that's explicitly allowed in the zoning ordinance, it is prohibited, as it does say that. If this request is denied tonight, no signs will be allowed for this new business. So they won't be allowed to put a wall sign, a freestanding sign, projecting sign, roof sign, canopy, or entrance structure. Since non-institutional freestanding signs are not allowed in the R5 district, there are no minimum setbacks, size, or height requirements. There are minimum requirements for freestanding institutional signs in residential districts, which could be used as a guide. In this case, that would mean maximum area 50 square feet, maximum height of 8 feet, and a setback of at least 8 feet from the property line. You can see in this graphic there, you can see the property line. You can see it a little bit better on this graphic right here. The property line is the blue line, and everything behind that, that's brown, is R5 and private property. The applicant has submitted sign plans from another plasma facility in Atlanta, Georgia, that they have built, and has indicated that they would like to build the same sign at 907 North Lincoln Avenue. That's your Exhibit E. The sign would need to be built at least 8 feet from the property line, and the dimensions, and we pulled this from the dimensions of their Atlanta, Georgia property, and they said that they'd like to build something exactly the same, is 5 feet tall, which is less than their freestanding institutional signs. It is no more than 6 feet wide, and the materials must be the same as Exhibit E, which is a brick base and aluminum construction. Here you can kind of see that this area was generally thought of as community business in the 2005 comprehensive plan. And here we have a business who would like to develop the property. There is a graphic in there just in the staff report, just for some knowledge about signs. It's kind of a interesting part of our zoning ordinance, and it's underlining zoning of the area. There are a lot of freestanding signs along Lincoln Avenue, and the speed limit is 35. So one thing that staff did note is that freestanding signs closer to the road might be an easier way for someone driving down Lincoln Avenue to find the place they're trying to get to. As part of the conditions for approval, staff is recommending a dedication of right-of-way. So as you can see in Exhibit, the site plan in Exhibit D shows a sidewalk that is on the property. Part of that sidewalk is on private property. Staff had originally in 2012 tried to rectify that situation, and that was about the time that the Senior Care Center shut down. So any trying to gain that right-of-way was halted at the time, and we kind of were waiting for a future developer to come to the site and ask them about the sidewalk. With the new use at this location and with increased traffic coming to the site, we have asked the applicant to dedicate the 7 feet necessary to straighten out the previous plans and really the mid-90s extension and a widening of Lincoln Avenue. Exhibit G was prepared by Public Works and our land surveyor. It's a legal description and a proposed dedication for the sidewalk. It's currently maintained and owned by the City of Urbana. Here is the sign concept from Atlanta, Georgia. Again, staff has made a recommendation for a condition that this new sign is constructed to these dimensions and using these materials. As there is no standard, all freestanding signs are not allowed in R5. There are really there's no regulations to go off of. So we suggested 8 feet, as that is the institutional sign freestanding 8 feet from the property line. I'm going to present you the case summary of findings. That is the summarized version of the major variance criteria. The first one is that the property is zoned R5, medium-high, multiple-family residential. 2, that the Stow Real Estate Holdings LLC requests a major variance to allow a freestanding commercial sign in the R5, medium-high, multiple-family residential zoning district. 3, City Council approved a special use permit for December 2nd, 2019, and I have the ordinance number 2019-12-69, with the following conditions: provide a landscape plan with any building permit, to build to general conformance with the proposed site plan, and to provide a CU MTD bus shelter along Lincoln Avenue. 4, the variance does not serve as a special privilege to the property owner, as there are non-residential and non-institutional uses allowed in the R5 zone, but signs for those non-residential and non-institutional uses are allowed. 5, the property owner did not deliberately create this situation, as the zoning ordinance allows non-residential and non-institutional uses, and not signs for non-residential and non-institutional uses. 6, the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, as the proposed use is located near 2 medical campuses and commercial, institutional, and residential properties with freestanding signs. 7, the variance will not create a nuisance, as it will be difficult to see the sign from many adjacent property owners, and will conform to the light level limitations specified in the zoning ordinance. 8, the variance represents a minimum deviation necessary from the zoning ordinance, as the variance would only allow a freestanding commercial sign in a district that does not allow a freestanding commercial sign. Zoning Board of Appeals has the following option in case ZBA-2019-Major-12. 1, forward the major variance request to City Council with a recommendation to approve the variance as requested based on the findings outlined in this memorandum. 2, forward the major variance to City Council with the recommendation to approve the variance with certain terms and conditions, and if so, articulate all terms, conditions, and findings. 3, deny the major variance request, and if so, articulate findings supporting the denial. Staff recommendation: staff recommends the Zoning Board of Appeals recommend approval of the major variance to City Council with the following conditions. 1, the petitioner dedicates right-of-way as illustrated in Exhibit G. And 2, that the sign generally conform to the sign plan in Exhibit E, and that it is set back at least 8 feet from the property line. And we have Representative Matt Deering here today, the applicant's lawyer, for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff?
I do have one question, and I'm looking at the reasons for variance on page 2. Is that a typographical error, or is it, I don't understand it. Applicants intends to retain, install, and maintain significant landscaping on the parcel, including retaining substantial, whatever, currently in place. Substantial what?
So these were the conditions for the special use permit that was approved on December 2nd by City Council. The applicant submits a landscaping plan prior to issuance of any building permit to ensure the proposed landscaping and screening conforms to the City of Urbana zoning ordinance standards for screening and required landscape buffers. Was that what you were?
No, I'm on the bottom of page 2, and it's the reason for variance. And I'm just wondering, to me it's not worded correctly, and I'm trying to understand the intent.
It's just substantial, it's just referring to the existing landscaping.
Applicant intends to retain, install, and maintain significant landscaping,
Are
including
you looking at the
retaining
application?
substantial what?
I'm sorry, are you
Substantial
looking at the
landscape-
application?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was in the staff report. So this application is filled out by the applicant, and I actually believe that maybe it was filled out by the person representing the applicant tonight. So this might be a really good question for Matt Deering tonight. Let's see if they... Yeah, I can see where that's very confusing, including retaining substantial something currently in place within the Lincoln Avenue right-of-way. I will say that at the December 2nd City Council meeting, the applicant, Scott Stow of Stow Real Estate Holdings, did talk extensively about landscaping plans that were very substantial and hardwood trees. And then I think I'd have to refer to Matt Deering about
Okay.
what the last section of that was.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, Lily. Representative of the petitioner can come forward, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Again, my name is Matt Deering. I'm with the law firm Meyer Capel Professional Corporation in Champaign, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant Stow. To quickly answer that question, the missing word is trees. So there are fairly significant trees in the right-of-way along Lincoln Avenue, and it's my client's intention to keep absolutely as many of those as they possibly can. I don't have a lot to add this evening in this, other than to confirm on behalf of my client that we do, one, appreciate Lily and the staff's hard work and comprehensive and reasoned analysis of this matter, and then confirm that my client does agree with the recommendation, including the conditions. And beyond that, I would open it up for any questions you might have.
Are there questions for the petitioner?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
There currently is a sign there from the old building. I think it says Care Center.
I
It's
don't
hidden
know
by
that
some
it's still
trees.
there.
It might be hidden by some trees.
But at any rate, is your sign then going to be perpendicular to the street rather than the front of it facing Lincoln?
Correct. Correct.
So you'll be able to see it from,
And
it'll
if
be a
there's
two-sided?
If there is an existing sign there, I believe that will be removed.
It has to be removed.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, yes, it would be two-sided.
And perpendicular to the street?
Correct.
Additional questions?
I just have one other
Go
comment to
ahead.
make. In the past, we've asked, different builders to provide landscaping,
Mhm.
and very often, the trees are planted and they're left to die. And one case in point is the U-Haul Center on Philo Road. I mean, trees were planted. How do you plan to keep these trees alive? I mean, will I need to call somebody if I see them withering?
I don't anticipate that being a problem. I know there was fairly significant discussion at the earlier meetings about this particular client believes in landscaping and wants their buildings and their properties to look good and to blend in with the neighborhood. And that's part of the reason he exhibited that he knew a lot more about particular trees than I certainly do. But that's where it came about, that any of the existing trees, they're really going to go out of their way to try to keep them. I don't think they promise that they can keep every single one of them, depending on where the building is. However, they're going to make every effort to keep as many as possible. And that, excuse me, some of their prior developments, examples and photographs of which were included in earlier applications, demonstrate that that is a material element to their developments.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else here to speak in favor or against this petition, I believe we're ready for a motion.
I move that we recommend approval of the major variance to City Council in case ZBA 2019-MAJ-12 with the following conditions. 1, that the petitioner dedicates right-of-way as illustrated in Exhibit G, and 2, that the sign generally conforms to the sign plan in Exhibit E, and that it is set back at least 8 feet from the property line.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I believe we're ready to call this for a vote, and it must pass by 2/3 of the members here to be forwarded on to the City Council.
Joanne Chester?
Yes.
Matt Cho?
Yes.
Ashley McLaughlin?
Yes.
Adam Roosh?
Yes.
Nancy Udman?
Yes.
Charles Warmbrun?
Yes.
Harvey Welsh?
Yes, that motion passes with the necessary votes to forward it on to the City Council for their review. And that will be done at what council meeting?
January 27th, 2020.
At the January 27, 2020 meeting of the City Council. Is there any old business? No? Yes, no?
There's no old business.
Is there any new business?
There's no new business.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I am just wondering if there would be a short study session on whether or not our zoning decisions set a precedent for future use or set a guideline. I'm trying to understand whether we are setting, like in the case that City Council ultimately denied that had 5 variances. City Council thought giving the variance would set a precedent. And is that what we're trying to do? And maybe we could have a study session about that.
I think I can check the bylaws really fast, but I think that's something that CBA would vote on. I will say that if you go to the City Council packet, and I think maybe even the second month, we had City of Urbana legal staff weigh in pretty heavily on that topic of setting a precedent, because it's something that also kind of came up in our public input. And they did say that's why we have the criteria. And the criteria is to ensure that we never set a precedent and that every case is done on a case-by-case basis. But if ZBA would like to have a study session, staff will try to accommodate.
Yeah, I would think that would be helpful, just to enlighten us on what the results of some of these decisions are, but I had thought that these cases were done on a case-by-case basis and certainly provide guidance, but precedent, I think, is a little too strong a word as to what the effects are.
As I understand it, they are, judged on a case-by-case basis based on how they meet the criteria. it can appear that it's setting precedent if the same answer to the same question every time ends up in the same result, but that's not because the 15 cases before that set a precedent. It's because all 15 cases met the criteria's requirements, not because case A said that case P had to be decided upon. There is no requirement that you follow a result of a preceding case. And so different boards can also come to the conclusion that a set of circumstances or an answer for a particular criteria does meet the criteria, whereas another board 5 years later might feel that it doesn't meet the criteria and come to a different decision.
Can I comment a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'd just say, 10, 15 years ago, we were sitting in here every third meeting, either was about corner lots or dual shared driveways with garages. We came to the conclusion, virtually, I think, every time the same conclusion, and I believe that you changed the ordinances then, because we were in a pattern of doing this, and then change the ordinance, and we haven't had any of those cases in 5 years because it's handled at a different level now. And I agree that everything's different. And if we have a major variance which needs to be approved by the city council, in my mind, unless it's horrendous, we should send it to the city council, because they're the people who've been elected by the people who need to make these critical decisions. That's about it.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
I think, I found something in the bylaws, Section 5 of Article 3. Special meetings may be called by the chair at his discretion or upon the request of 2 or more members, provided that public notice is given in accordance with the Open Meetings Act.
I don't think you want a special meeting, right? She just wants a better definition of the things that she brought up.
All right. No audience participation unless member. You have anything else to say to us today, sir? All right. Is there additional staff report of any kind? Then this meeting is adjourned.